Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Bay Area Content Marketing Meetup on Zoom. Today, we're talking about building thriving communities. We're joined by Amy Vaughan, an award-winning creative director.
This meeting is being recorded.
Oh, okay, we're being recorded. Amy is an award-winning creative director turned CEO of Together Digital. And Amy's going to share how authentic networking has become the secret weapon for closing the gender gap in marketing and beyond, drawing on her powerful journey from managing global campaigns for P&G, Ford, and Walmart to growing and supporting a community of over 500 members that deliver real career results. Amy will reveal why traditional networking often fails women and how to
Hey
revolutionize.
Siri, power down cell phone.
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
I'm going to mute some folks. So Amy, take things away. Thanks for joining us and take things away.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dennis. I appreciate you inviting me to be here. And so nice to meet all of you. Thank you for showing up. Sometimes that's just half the battle in our world and how crazy and busy things are. So hopefully you're going to walk away with some really awesome insights, opportunities, and new ways to think about building community and especially thriving communities in the digital space. Now, I intersect a couple of different ideas. So just roll with me on this because I feel like I have a lot of good content to share, but I don't want to weigh you down. But really, I want you, if anything, to walk away understanding the power of intentional and authentic community building and what it can do, not just for your marketing results, but everyone's career trajectory, myself included. So, as Dennis said, my name is Amy Vaughan. I am the owner and chief empowerment officer of Together Digital. It is a diverse and collaborative community of women who live, work, and breathe within digital marketing, advertising, and tech. What's unique about this company is they really, truly do choose to use their knowledge, power, and connections to not compete, but collaborate pretty much daily, thanks to all things virtual like Zoom and Slack. But a little bit about me and my background to help you kind of understand and to paint the picture of really how impactful community building can be. I am like case study of one here, right? So I started off in the industry in the early 2000s and climbed the creative ladder, as Dennis said, from, copywriter to creative director, working on brands like P&G, Ford, Walmart, blah, blah, blah. You've heard them, you know them. Super proud of the work that I did, but my biggest career surprise was my second career, and that was becoming a mom. I discovered at that point how much harder it became to balance networking, career growth, and my family. And I was about 7 months pregnant with my second kiddo when I received an email through LinkedIn from some random person, didn't know, but it was this woman who was the founder of then called Women in Digital. She invited me to come and join her. She shared her story of experiencing sexual harassment and discrimination in the workplace. I have been very fortunate. I had a lot of fantastic male allies and champions throughout my career, but her story resonated with me because I'd heard it from so many other female coworkers. I'd also been a part of the 3% conference, which was started by Kat Gordon out in San Francisco in 2012. And it was called 3% because at the time, only 3% of creative directors were women. I had no idea what anomaly I was. So here I am, 7 months pregnant, a creative director, two kids at home. It's no wonder I feel so isolated. I am either creative director who is striving to grow my team, keep my clients happy, hit the deadlines, and a mom of two kids under the age of 3. And so when this Together Digital community, then Women in Digital, found me, I decided to drive up to Columbus, see what she was talking about. Got up at 5 a.m., drove all of 7 months pregnant, showed up and walked into a room of 100 women and truly found my people. And walking into that room absolutely changed the trajectory of my life and my career. I had no idea walking into that room and saying yes to coming to this event that I'd be owning and running that company in the next 6 years. So fast forward, I became a volunteer for the organization, served as board president for the Cincinnati chapter, loved my time, really enjoyed exploring stretching my legs as somebody who was basically now working in operations to manage a board. But agencies don't love to give the opportunity per se, especially large conglomerate owned, of, creatives to cross over into operations. But I was interested and said, I want to run a business. And I had a boss once tell me creatives can't run companies. So come 2019, I had shared some of these things with the founder. She had seen the work I had done with the board. And while we're at the conference, she tells me she's going to go run for Congress because a member looked at her and said, "What you're doing is amazing. You need to go run for Congress." She said yes, something she never saw herself doing. And then in turn, passed that opportunity on to me and asked if I would run the Together Digital Network while she ran for Congress. And then big old record scratch. I wish I had the sound effect for it for full effect. COVID hit 3 months later. And here we were, a small mission-based business who was pretty much reliant on member dues, ticket sales, and sponsorships. And two out of those three revenue streams went away. And all of a sudden, now I have to keep a business afloat in the midst of a pandemic. And so between 20 and 2021, we were really looking at ways we could keep the business alive, the community alive through the pandemic. We really knew at that time that authentic connection is a lifeline. It's not a luxury. We all remember that. We all lived it. I actually have some more interesting insights and data on the sense of this other epidemic that we had to kind of endure and are continuing to endure despite COVID. But anyways, in 2022, I bought the business, became the sole owner, proving again that, those those connections can lead to life-changing results. So I was able to basically work through and transform our Together Digital group and community into the kind of culture and environment I wish would have existed when I was still in agencies. And this came through a lot of some of the framework that I'm going to share with you. Because when you literally are dependent upon people engaging and buying your product, your service, or membership, you have to find the right ways to show up for them. So I want to share with you some of the things we were able to do as a team and as a community to actually make that happen so that our organization, when many other organizations that were similar setup did not make it through the pandemic, we were able to continue to show up and serve our members. So today, I am, again, like I said, the CEO of Together Digital, recovering perfectionist. I really do believe small rooms and big conversations can change entire careers. In fact, it's part of a working title for a book that I'm working on. So I'll definitely share more of that with the community once it's out and about. But it's definitely about closing that networking gap to help women and other marginalized groups find the connections they need to have those career and life-changing opportunities. So why are communities so powerful for marketers, right? We're all marketers. We're here to talk about content and marketing. One of my favorite folks in this space is Miss Nancy Harhut. If you guys have gone to social media marketing, if you've gone to any marketing conference, you've probably seen her name on the list or the agenda. If you've seen her speak, kudos to you. If you haven't, you need to go watch her speak. I feel like every time I see her, she becomes more dynamic, more engaging, and gives such great insights. But I love this insight that was from her book about oh my gosh, I knew I was going to mess up the title, using behavioral science for marketers. This really helps you understand why people buy, what motivates them. And it's all very much emotional, but also people tend to follow the actions and choices of others, especially in uncertain situations. And by showcasing testimonials, customer reviews, case studies, social media endorsements, marketers can leverage social proof to build trust, credibility, and influence in purchasing decisions. That's the opportunity you have as marketers by taking the time to actually create an intentional space for community that actually serves the community members, not just the bottom line. You have that influential power now to bring in even more. So it compounds upon itself. So thanks, Nancy, for the amazing quote. All right. So I mentioned earlier about this other epidemic that we have been facing. Now, this has been something that's been cited long before COVID came, and that is the loneliness epidemic. The Surgeon General, I think 3 or 4 years ago, published an article at length on this. He dubbed Gen Z the loneliest generation. It's a culmination of limited, like more online engagement and experience that is all transactional versus more transactional than transformative. It's less about relationship building. It's like you're doing the self checkout, you're ordering online, you're using Uber Eats, we're spending less time in public spaces with people. Also, our families are becoming even more nuclear, where we're not in community with others. We don't have large families living together. We have people living across the states, across the country, across the globe. And because of that, we don't have as much human contact as we used to. And there's like the actual aspect of being with people that makes us feel lonely, or the lack thereof. And then there's perceived isolation. And perceived isolation, we have all experienced. It is that sense of I am alone, even though I am standing in the middle of a crowded room, right? We've all been there. And perceived isolation, the Surgeon General has cited, can actually be the same as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. I don't know if you guys remember a TED Talk a while back that was like, sitting is the new smoking. Well, loneliness is the new sitting and smoking because it can also shorten your life by up to 15 years. So the impacts aren't just mental, and they're not just psychological, they are physical. And so, why I'm bringing this up is because we need community more than ever. And I really do want to encourage you as marketers to look at ways in which you can leverage your products, your services, your brands in your own existing community to establish and create more spaces for belonging and community. And again, not just for your bottom line, but because as humans, we really need it. I'm going to pivot to networking because that's a part of this whole community building thing. And when it comes to networking and community building, I kind of lumped it all together because they actually have a lot of similar parts about them that are broken. But networking, I mean, I talked earlier about the networking gap in my book and trying to solve for that networking gap because their opportunities are abundant when you have the right connections, right? It's not what you know, it's who you know, they say, right? Walking into the right room, talking to the right person, winning that person's trust can, again, ultimately change your life the way that it did mine. Another great example from a monetary standpoint is Disney. They basically got started on their ABC acquisition of $19 billion. It started on the golf course. And again, I love a good game of golf. I'm an outdoor chick all the way. Love to go to the driving range, but there's something to the fact that a lot of traditional marketing, whether it be golf courses or afternoon drinks, I started off my story with the fact that I am a working mom. Now I'm a working mom with a business owner who's a business owner and also taking care of an aging parent. I don't have time after work always for networking. I got to do school pickup. We've got practices and, after school activities and volunteer items that I might pick up and do for the school. There's just a lot that really holds specifically women, and those that aren't just parents, but women in general from attending certain types of events. Not to mention, the internal limitations for a lot of women and some men as well that I've talked to in research for my book, imposter syndrome, a lack of a sense of mentorship, the sense of industry gatekeeping. There's just a lot of, and we've all been there, kind of ick environments when you go to network that feel forced, that feel fake, that feel all about the transition of how many business cards can I get into my hand, into others' hands? How many high quality people can I meet at this event? There's some really awful advice out there on like qualifying people as you walk in the room by sight. And it breaks my heart because one, you're excluding people that actually could make a difference in your career. And two, they're being excluded. The cost of business at the end of the day, too, when you aren't thinking about creating inclusive networking or community building opportunities. And what I mean in that, too, I would also say like intentionally designed events that are easy for those who are hard of hearing to be able to listen and hear. I don't know why all these networking events are always held in loud bars with DJs. I have a husband who's hard of hearing. It's torture for him. It's embarrassing for him. I've got friends who are neurodivergent and who are sensitive to certain auditory situations, crowded rooms, cramped rooms. A lot of us felt that after COVID, right? You're like, I don't want to go step into that crowd of shoulder to shoulder people and scream at each other to try to make meaningful connection. But what happens is when we kind of just stick to these traditional community and networking situations and scenarios, is that it really basically keeps out that diverse talent. They can't access those informal and even formal networking opportunities. And so companies are missing out as well on innovation and additional perspectives. And then the next issue I see consistently between, again, the marketing and community building and networking is that I think as marketers, we are so good at building audiences. We're not so great at building and fostering communities. And I understand now why. It is hard. This is my full-time job. I am one person and I have two other contractors that work with me, and I work full-time and they're both part-time. So that's like a culmination of 60 to 80 hours a week that are focused on maintaining our memberships, providing the accurate programming, surveying, listening to members, onboarding them. It takes time and it takes energy and it takes effort. And the results are not always automatic, right? It takes time, it takes intention, it takes consistency. And I'll harp on that a little bit more too later. But the difference between engagement and genuine connection is another thing we tend to like focus on. And I will actually get to a really cool checklist that you guys can either screenshot and save, or I'm happy to share this presentation about red flags and green flags of knowing when you're looking at the right types of engagement to know that you're actually building a community versus building an audience. And then, as I mentioned earlier, you know, traditional networking often feels transactional, it feels forced, it feels uncomfortable, it feels awkward if you're not an extrovert. I don't know, some extroverts even do find it kind of awkward. And it also can mirror some bad content marketing as well, which I'll get to here in a moment. In the sense of traditional networking, I've dogged on it enough, but you know, just to drive it home in case you don't believe me, some of the things that have really gotten under my skin over the years is the speed networking. Don't look at your content and say, am I trying to speed network or am I really trying to connect with someone here? Because I think speed networking, somebody had the idea and they thought they were brilliant. And it is brilliant in a sense of like, oh, I want quantity of people, but what quality folks are you actually reaching out to? This is really why surface level professional events fail because you know, everyone shows up. It's like, ooh, hey, small talk, small talk, small talk, which is like nails on chalkboard for someone like me. Business card, business card, business card. Will I follow up? I don't know. Will they follow up? I don't know. You know, there's just not deep, meaningful conversations and opportunities happening in that space when we try to force this whole idea of how many people can we put into this room and make them connect versus creating small intentional spaces that are basically ideal for actual conversation. So you can, again, you can draw that parallel to bad content and marketing, quantity over quality, transaction over relationship. I think this is a good point in time to call out because, you know, can we go through a marketing presentation without mentioning AI? I don't think so, but I don't even have a whole slide. In fact, I was proud. My whole presentation, there is not a single AI or artificial intelligence on screen. But I will say this is something we have to be mindful of, right? We have the ability now to generate more content than ever thanks to the support of AI. And hopefully you're using it in a very ethical and thoughtful way. But some people aren't. And so we're creating more noise than ever on the internet as marketers. And I think we need to be more careful and cautious than ever about, you know, really valuing the quality of what we're putting out there versus the quantity. All right. So that was one of my first questions I had as I was thinking through this is like, are you getting impressions, but not leaving a lasting one? You know, it's important to think, okay, yeah, I need numbers. I need eyeballs. How many eyeballs do I have? But how many of them linger? How many of them remember you? How many of them come back to your site? How many of them recommend you? Because at the end of the day, networking, marketing to me, and actually one of my favorite talks, that was you, Dennis, the CRM and dating. Do you remember that? I think that was the first time I got to see you speak.
I do remember that.
And it was like you guys handed out little ring pops and you were like, don't propose on the first date. And I think that's it.
Right.
I can't tell you how many times I have cited that talk and that conversation because it was such a great, it is true. Like all of it is dating. And so really, I want you all to ask yourself, is your content at the end of the day a really bad date? Is it that person that like talks about itself incessantly and doesn't consider the other person on the other side of the conversation? Doesn't take a breath and let them chime in to hold space and give space for conversation? Or are you just kind of content vomiting all over them? And that's a bad date. Nobody wants that.
There's a parallel to that, which was even if the first date is fabulous, it's too early to ask for your hand in marriage as
Yes.
a follow-up to the first date. You have to nurture the relationship more before you ask someone to become your customer.
Absolutely. And you know, I think it was from that talk between yours and Nancy's. I took so many notes and I literally took what you all advised. Oh, and then Anne too, of course, Anne Hanley's. And I revamped our whole welcome email series. And now I get people that reply to my welcome email, which is an automated drip campaign, but at least once or twice a month, if not more, new people will join and they will reply to my email, which I was like, I've never seen somebody reply to an automated email before, but
Right.
yeah,
That's
great
excellent.
presentation. Yeah. All right. So to me, I think the intention, whether you're leveraging it for building community and networking, if you're using it to build community for the sake of being able to market and find your audience and grow your audience and support your audience, really the kind of the big picture is, in my opinion, is to really set the right intentions. Know that you're going in to do this. It's going to be a little bit more time intensive, but at the end of the day, it is the long game for marketers, right? At the end of the day, we want loyalty. That's priceless, right? We know it costs 10 times more to go find a new customer than it is to keep an existing. And community is such a great way to do that. But you have to do it for the right reasons. It's not just the bottom line. You have to serve a bigger purpose. You have to have a mission. You have to have a vision. You have to have a point of view. And it doesn't have to be something like Together Digital. But I think if you can find out what that is, that's a great place to start. Another thing that's important is really when you're creating a community, it's about identifying the problem behind the problem. And sometimes you're going to find there's just a whole lot of it's a whole can of worms, right? In behind all of that. You might think you're coming after the fact that only so many women are executives in the C-suite. But at the other side of it, you begin to find out the aspect of family dynamics and planning, the sandwich generation, imposter syndrome. There's like a million factors that come into why women are struggling to kind of close the pay gap. So identify the problem, and not just that, but the problem behind the problem, and then start the conversation. I'm going to go through this framework here on this next slide or two to really help you understand how we do this and why it's really important. But I'm going to kind of give you, as a case in point, an example for Together Digital, what we do and why we do this. So I talked about consistency earlier. I think establishing a consistent practice that serves the intention. So I mentioned the intention in the beginning. For us, it wasn't just about the founder's story of sexual harassment and discrimination. It started there, but it could not end there because there were too many other women who had already experienced that and a much larger societal problem we needed to address. But there's small ways in which we can do that, right? It doesn't have to be something big, flashy, and overnight. I think it actually starts with a consistent practice. So we have a consistent practice called Ask and Give Exchange. And this is something we have been doing almost since day one as a community. And what we realize is that women don't often ask for help. They feel like they have to be it all and do it all the time. And it's exhausting, and they're burning out, and they're leaving the workforce. They're leaving and starting their own companies. And so, the Ask and Give Exchange is our way of creating a safe space for vulnerability and questions that takes consistent practice because, being vulnerable and, well, first of all, I don't know how you guys feel, but being asked, like, what can I do for you? How can I help you? I'll say that and I get deer in headlights from people, especially women, because they're not used to being asked. So they half the time they don't even know. They know they need a million things, but they don't know how to ask for help. So it's a muscle that they have to build. And the way we create this consistently throughout the community is that we feature asks and gives within our newsletters. We might share one if it's not something confidential on our social media properties. We do it religiously in Slack. We have a whole channel just dedicated to our asks and gives. When we meet in person, we will always do an ask and give exchange session. So our members come to know and expect that this is always a place where it is safe for you to come and ask whatever you need. No guilt, no shame, and everyone is going to give without any judgment. So it's a great practice. And for us, like that is kind of like our consistency, right? That's our drumbeat because we want the community to constantly be leveraging its own like combined power, and being able to do that through the ask and give exchange is the way that we do that consistently. And you've heard me mention it before. I think, again, small room, big conversations, choosing quality over quantity and a more intimate space to do just that. I have done things like restrict our number of attendees to our conference to like 150, because I know that's the magic number for us to have people feel seen and heard, to have time to connect. We put them into peer groups at the conference so they can not just be in this one big room of 150, but a small circle of 5 to 10 women, and watching the level of engagement and, connections and the friendships that are established and created within a span of like an hour that we give them to meet with their peer group during our national conference. In fact, these are actually pictures. This is a picture of an ask and give. This is a picture of a peer group at one of our conferences. I mean, I love these photos, especially this one's one of my favorites because you can truly see how everyone is listening and how much easier it is to listen when you provide those small rooms and big opportunities. So as marketers think about How can you do that? How can you stop just talking to the masses and engaging with the masses and find that small safe space to create the opportunity to have a more vulnerable conversation with your customers? Because at the end of the day, the community manage advantage to me is amazing. I mean, again, like I said, my predecessor ran for Congress. Um, I ended up owning and running a company. Together Digital, we have a whole channel dedicated to wins. We've had at least 15 new businesses started in the last 5 years by women who joined our entrepreneur, solopreneur peer group. We have had women get pay raises of up to $60,000 a year based on the advice that they were given when they put out an ask. We have had women collaborate on new potential clients and find new business together. We've had a couple members go into business together. We have had more than I can count people who have been hired because they met somebody through the community. So I think it's really important to know and understand that the collective power and creating your community, it's not just going to serve them, but it will ultimately serve your brand, your mission, your purpose. Because, like I said, to me, the framework is really about, creating it's a magnetic content framework that really allows for you to bring the right people in. I was featured on a podcast, I think sometime last year, and it was all about business and growth. I was a little nervous about being on it because I have probably some very contrary views on what growth is and looks like. And he's like, "What are your growth plans and how aggressive are you being?" And I was just like, "Listen, women don't have equality among all the other women." And that's something that I became acutely aware of during the pandemic. And because of that, like my goal is quality of members over quantity, because all it takes is one bad apple to come in and disrupt our member code of conduct, to try to sell to people, to try to diminish other women, things like that. And, I was like, those were things that I had to take a stand on and really decide that those types of members were not the kinds of members that I wanted any sort of money from. And it really hasn't hurt our growth. If anything, too, I spent a lot less time running and recruiting and doing sales. Referrals get us so many opportunities because of community. And then also, we have like a 98% membership retention rate because all of our members feel seen, heard, loved, and valued. So this framework is really all about listening, understanding what challenges your community is actually facing. You can do this through social listening tools. You guys probably know about a lot of them. But even just talking to your customers. I love that as soon as we got on this call, Dennis started talking to Jessica. Where are you? How did you hear about us? All that kind of stuff. Like that kind of information gathering in the moment. We don't think about that, but we really need to do that. And wherever you can bake this into your process. So say you're a shop owner. As people are coming in, how did you find out about me? Where are you from? Did you come locally? Are you traveling? Make conversation. People want to be heard and seen. And that starts to build the relationship. And so I think things like that, looking at your process throughout the entire, whether it's your customer journey, your internal processes, really look at them and say, always be asking, what are the challenges that they're facing and how can we begin to address them? Because that's where you take and amplify. You start to create the content that gives the voice to the customer to talk to your future customers, because what it's going to do is attract others who have the same challenges and will naturally gravitate towards the conversation. So those are our three biggest draws for Together Digital: is our website through search, because they're looking up the problems and issues that we talk about on our blog and on our podcast content; referrals; and then LinkedIn. And again, this is because we're a business. So LinkedIn, man, it's just like the place for all of us to be as business to business pre people. And then connect. I think at the end of the day, it's not just enough to bring people in by listening and amplifying and attracting. You really have to find the right ways in which to create and satisfy that need for solidarity and that shared experience. So whatever your product or service is trying to solve for, make sure, like Dennis said, after the first date, don't propose. Continue to make sure they feel seen and heard. Give them a question to answer to help fuel where you guide them next, because you are providing help and support, which eventually will lead to and close a sale. And then you just kind of start the whole cycle over again. And it just really feeds upon itself. And it really gives you a lot of great opportunities for content. I think a lot of us feel the pressure of creating content. It feels relentless. But at the end of the day, the beauty of this whole thing is where content strategy meets community strategy. Community is a content generator. Whether you realize it or not, that's one way you could actually sell in the idea of establishing and creating community for your brand, is talking about how the community itself is the content. I'll give you a great example. I had the privilege of working on, it was a P&G Ventures client at the time, which is like a small in-house kind of starter brand. It's an incubator kind of within P&G, and it was called Pepper and Wits. And a good friend of mine now was the community manager, and Pepper and Wits was all about helping to create women's products for those who are going through menopause. And there's a lot about menopause we don't talk about, even as women, among women. And so as you're encroaching upon 40, and all of a sudden you're not just having hot flashes, which everybody thinks it is, and night sweats, you have insomnia, brain fog, fatigue, all of these different things, memory loss, all this different stuff that you don't realize. And we kind of started going through, and I asked her to kind of bring to me what was women's attitude towards, menopause? How are they talking about it within the community? What were some of the biggest pain points they felt? And, one of the things that prevailed was it was more than hot flashes. And then the client also had some comedians, I guess, kind of write up some fun things about menopause from like a comedic standpoint. And I kind of took all of that, went back to the office, and this was just like a status meeting on another project. But we discussed this. I met with my friend Lucretia about the community stuff, got those insights and communities, heard them out, and went back and wrote a script kind of off the cuff to be like, what? Let's make this video of like, hey, listen, it's like, menopause is more than just hot flashes. And then we did an animation, so the woman explodes and becomes a pile of dust with some talking lips. She says it's all these different things. And one of the other things they talked about was vaginal dryness. And this was our way to approach a sensitive topic and not get kicked off of Facebook by talking about it, was creating this very kind of relatable, very customer voice driven spot, an animated spot to kind of help women understand that we understood what menopause was like. And so we talk about the frustrations, and the views and the engagement on that video were like through the roof. There were some women that didn't find menopause funny, and I get it, but the vast majority were definitely into it. And again, that community was such a great, great community, in the sense of just always engaging, because it is such a unearthed, undiscussed kind of problem. And we found so many, again, problems within the problem that we were able to just leverage that. I think we made like a total of 8 other videos. And this was like all new, out of scope work. I think we ended up getting close to $200,000. This is a small little agency I was working at the time. So that was big money for them. $200,000 worth of, no, it was probably closer to $500,000. At that point, we got to 8 different videos that we created for this community. And it was all by listening and all kind of taking that humorous approach to really show them that we related. So that was definitely a strategy of really bringing the community voice into it. Looking at their challenges, looking at the things they're talking about, not just within your space, but just out in the world in general. And just really consider how that thought leadership content can open doors in a way that cold outreach never could. The number of women that related to that video content, it just was like the best thing to see, all of the comments and reactions. So another one example is we had, for Together Digital, we do a national conference every year, and one of our contractors gave us like a list of proposed topics. One of them was like 5 tips for women in tech, because we wanted to make sure we baked in more women in tech into the event. And I was like, I mean, I don't know. I think those listicles, I've been doing them for 20 years now. Maybe I'm just a little spent, but if I'm spent, people have to be spent. How do we listen to the audience and know what other kinds of content we need to be creating? And so what we actually did was we actually outsourced the opportunity to our members. And we had started the conversation about like, what do you hate most about conferences as we're planning our conference? And they were happy to share. And a lot of it was things like navigating conferences and events like this as someone who is neurodivergent. So we had a member who's really like involved in the community. She wrote that piece for us, and we featured her. We talked about her. We championed her. She talked about her personal story. She opened up that door for vulnerability so that when other people came to the conference, because they read that blog post, they already felt seen and heard and included. Another one was an attendee's guide to Together Digital's annual event from someone who's been there. We could have created our own guide. Here's the agenda. Here's what you do. Here's the before and after things. Instead, we went to one of our longest standing members outside of myself, Kathy Spicer out of Cleveland. And we were like, Kathy, you are like our conference pro. Would you like it? Could we feature you? And could you write about your experiences and what you recommend? And she was like, oh, absolutely. And I mean, at the conference, people sought her out to talk about how much they loved her blog post about that. And again, I think helped set the tone, right? Because she understood, as the voice of the customer, as somebody who experienced our event, an authentic perspective, right? Because it's not just us cramming it down their throat saying, authenticity, inclusion, all the keywords, all the buzzwords, to have your customer be that voice and to say that through their own testimonial and experience. It was such a better result than us just posting up a general guide in a single page PDF. So again, the result is attracting women facing those identical challenges created by and creates that instant community bond. All right. So I think, a couple of just overarching guiding principles, just as you're building and creating and establishing communities, it's important to fall in love with the problem, not the solution. I think in the very early days of Together Women in Digital, Together Digital, it was really cool to just kind of hang your hat on, I belong to this really badass girls club. But at the end of the day, the problems don't go away and they don't get solved if we don't identify them, address them, and continue to work on them as an organization. So while Together Digital is not the end all and the be all and the solution for women's equality, unfortunately, it's going to take a lot more than that, systematic change. But at the end of the day, falling in love with the problem and not the solution is going to keep you moving forward. Make your members and your customers the heroes, not you. It is easy to want to be that bad date and just, again, kind of just give it all to them and be like, love me. And they're just like, but I had no opportunity to share what it was that I actually needed. Consistency. I mentioned this throughout. Consistency, consistency, consistency. The reason why it's important is it builds trust. So look for those practices and those ways in which you can. And as I mentioned, as a case in point example, our ask and give exchange, just common practice across all of our different channels, across all of our different touch points for our members so that they know that Together Digital is a space where they can ask for help if they need it anytime they need it. It's like your own personal little bat phone. And then co-creation, it is key. Stop killing yourself trying to create a mass amount of content that means nothing to anyone but you. Really look to your audience and find out how can they help you synthesize ideas, opportunities, gaps within your content, and then can they collaborate on that? Again, make them the heroes. That's going to seem that much more authentic. And then some quick little red flag, green flags. I love a good checklist if you're kind of looking at your content holistically, thinking about how, when, and where you are showing up. Some red flags might be, again, like I said, metrics. It's hard, right? We love the vanity metrics. I actually was thinking back as I was creating this to my days writing for Pringles when it was open API, no pay to play on Facebook. We had 7 million fans and we grew it to 20 million fans in 1 year. And every post I wrote had thousands of likes and thousands of comments. Those days are gone, unfortunately, thanks to all of these APIs that we're working against and the mass amount of content that we have out there now, right? So, while we like the likes and the shares, like look and make sure, are you getting true engagements? Are you getting regular commenters, people that you recognize by name? That shows you're building community versus just that transactional, like, oh, yeah, I see it, I'm going to go ahead and like it. Are they commenting? Are they commenting regularly? Comments themselves, champion, take it to your bosses. If you have a community for your business and you see comments that share personal stories and experiences that directly attribute to your brand, talk about it. One of my favorites is Together Digital is one of our members reached out to me and was like, Amy, I got a 750% return on my member dues with all the new members that I got from being in this network. I was like, holy crap, I need to make it out a billboard. And of course I asked her permission to share, but that or any other stories, like meaningful stories that we have, we always ask for our members or customers, permission, but take that stuff and share it and look for those meaningful personal stories because that's showing that you're actually making a difference. Make sure that your content doesn't feel like a press release or a sales pitch. Make sure that the content sparks some type of debate or meaningful discussion. Don't be afraid. if you can as a brand, I know it's hard. We talk about TOV a lot, tone of voice. I always say have a POV. And it's not about getting political. It's just about having values as a business and aligning to them every from the inside out. It starts at the top and it works its ways down and it goes from the inside to the out. Between expressing and consistently demonstrating your values, that is another way to show trust or to kind of build trust, as well as transparency. These are words that scare a lot of other businesses, but that's why I'm a small business owner. I can do it how I like. But there's definitely benefits to making sure that your content is meaningful and not just kind of adding to the noise of the internet. As I mentioned, are you the hero of all of your stories? Whenever you're posting something, you maybe need to like look at what you're doing. Can look at the fact that community members might be tagging each other in comments. That's another good indicator that you're doing well, is when people tag other people to share that content. Again, that word of mouth is really big for us. Um, Content could be published by any other competitor in your industry. Are you focusing on metrics versus the meaningful connections, and then little to no behind the scenes or valuable or vulnerable content? I think that's another thing that kind of scares a lot of brands, but I do encourage you to try to find ways to kind of start to break down those barriers.
Wow.
And then some of the green flags I mentioned, I kind of cross-pollinated the green flags, but look at to see how many people are sharing and how you've helped them specifically. Follow up with conversations that happen in your DMs or other platforms. Like I said, Danelle, who told me about her business success through the community, she just DM'd that to me, and there was no way I wasn't just going to let it sit there in my DM. So look at your most like biggest advocates and really find ways to champion them as well and feature them. And then make sure that the content feels authentically you. And, oh, I lied. There is AI at the very end, the last word. Make sure it doesn't feel like it could be written by AI, which, I get it. It's a challenge for people right now, but hey, it's the world we live in. All right. Well, I would love to stay connected with all of you. So feel free to grab your phone, scan the QR code. That'll take you to my LinkedIn page so that we can connect and continue the conversation. We have plenty of time, I think like 10 minutes or so for questions. If you guys have them or even comments, I'm open to whatever y'all want to discuss. But thank you.
Kevin. Go ahead, Kevin.
I don't have a question per se, but I just wanted to point out that your concept of content strategy and community aligning lines up very well with Marcus Sheridan's concept of they ask, you answer. I mean, they're almost like variations of the same thing.
Yep. I'll have to look him up. I've not looked at his stuff. That's cool. That's good to know. Thanks, Kevin.
Other questions or comments? Feel free to unmute, or I see Andy.
Yeah, I was just going to say thanks, Amy. Hi, Amy.
Hey, Andy,
I don't know
how
if you
are
saw
you? Good
me
to
at the
see
beginning.
you. I didn't.
I was one of the OG people of Together Digital back when it was called Women in Digital. That was before Amy took over. I was on the board of the Indianapolis chapter. So I've been involved with the organization for a long time. So it seems I don't know where time goes, but it's been a while.
know,
And
right?
I've made a ton of meaningful, people still who I was on the board with, we still go out and have lunch and all those kinds of things and, connect and network and things like that. So it's definitely a great organization and lots of lessons learned. I thought for sure during COVID that it was going to be the end of the organization just because of all the changes with the other person who was leading it leaving. And there was some tumult, if you want to call it that, in the organization, which Amy probably knows of. So kudos to Amy for keeping it alive and growing it even better.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's good to see you, Andy. We have to catch up soon.
Content marketing world.
Yeah. I feel like that's where we see each other every year, isn't it? All right, we got a couple hands raised.
Yeah, we live like a couple hours apart.
I see Christy has her hand raised.
Hi. Hi, Amy. Thank
Hey,
you. This was really
Christy.
helpful. And thank you, Dennis, I think you're the organizer. This is my first event. My question is, you mentioned that you have a member code of conduct, I think is what you called it.
Yep.
Can you just share a little bit more about that? I have a community. I'm really hesitant to do something like this.
To Andy's point, like the kind of COVID was like every wedding and funeral you've ever been to combined into one like 2-year stint, right? Where it just brings out the ugly in everybody. Because people were stressed, people were despondent. They were scared. There was just so much going on in the world. And so we didn't have a member code of conduct before that. And so I was like, we have to do this because, it kind of has, and I can send it to you and you can feel free to take what you'd like from it. It was really about no solicitation, but then it was like, there's an anti-bullying policy. Like we had other women bullying other women in a women's network. And so for us, it was really like, what are our goals and our values? Who is our ideal customer profile, and what boundaries do we need to create to maintain that safe space? So confidentiality was another big one, and that was always spoken. But then I was like, no, we're going to put this in writing. Every person who joins has to read this and they have to check the box and they have to sign it. So, as an organization who's trying to build intentional community as a business, I will tell you right now that people, the wrong community members in your community business can absolutely take it down, and they might try. But that's why you really have to be, again, quality over quantity. Things like those guardrails of the member code of conduct. And then after the code of conduct is there, like you just have to do a good job of enforcing it and finding kind but clear ways to let certain people know if they've ever breached that. And I will be honest, I think in the almost 6 years that I've been doing this now, knock on wood, I've had to kind of really deal with only not even a handful. I can't even count on one hand how many women I've had to be like, listen, we have a no solicitation policy. You can't keep doing this. Or, hey, listen, we don't allow for bullying within our like Slack space. You can't talk to other people in that way. We have to work on ways that we can communicate more effectively without making others feel diminished. Or, hey, you might not have meant to, but you broke confidentiality with this XY situation. Now we need to address it. But by having those boundaries and guardrails up to start with, I mean, I can't imagine how much trouble it saved me as a small business owner as well. So great question. And again, I'm happy to share it with you.
Okay. How should I request that from you?
If you want to DM me your email address, I'll just email you the link to it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And next up is Abu Bakar. You want to come off mute?
I am. First of all, thank you for this wonderful session. And my question is like, what advice would you give to someone who is generally introverted and also very naturally hesitant to ask personal questions or like probing questions or conversational questions in the communication? And sometimes these questions like, why are you here? How did you come to know about us? Feels like a bit forced or inauthentic one, and kind of create like cognitive dissonance. Like I'm faking it. I'm really not interested in this information. So how can I build genuine connections if I have a personality like this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it does start with, vulnerability begets vulnerability. And if you want it, you have to give it. So that means that it does require a little bit of you sometimes going out of your comfort zone and finding your ability to kind of share what feels like enough to open that door for the other person. So a good example might be I started doing member one-on-one onboardings during the pandemic. And actually this is a credit to the founder's husband, Seth. He's like, oh, why don't you just start doing virtual one-on-ones? And it changed the way I saw the organization, because now it's not just a bunch of faceless women I don't know across the globe. Now I get the chance to meet just about every new member who decides to sign up for 15, 20 minutes with me. The chance for me to ask her, like, how did you find out about us? What brings you here? How can we help you? And just that little bit of one-on-one time from me not only increases the likelihood that they'll stay on as members, but two, gives me a ton of qualitative data and insights as to why they joined, how they joined, what they need, so I can begin to tailor and shift our content if we need to. We do an annual member survey as well. But as far as opening up in those conversations, whether it's one-on-one networking or even virtual Zooms, I have a lot of little tricks of like, just kind of sharing when people ask, how are you today? It's a formality, I think, for a lot of us, especially stateside, of like, hey, how are you? Good, how are you? And it's really just like a checklist item. I actually tell them how I'm doing. I mean, like, listen, it's kind of been a day because, you know, I smashed my little tea container, my favorite little tea container in the kitchen. So I'm a little miffed about that. And then I broke something else this morning. So I'm kind of thinking like I just need to call it a day. It's stupid stuff like that. You would be surprised. And all of a sudden people are like, oh my God, I hate days like that. I had a day like that a couple weeks ago, you know, or I'll take a call and it's in like a quiet setting, but if my kids are in the background, I don't care. They're in the background because that is also life. Like I'm creating community and space. I understand the need for professionalism. But for me, it's actually knocking back that sense that we all need to look, sound, and be alike. This is what I love about running my own business too, that makes it easier. I have a whole section in my book about networking from the inside out, and it really starts with you taking time to build your own sense of self and self-awareness so that when you do show up in spaces, you're kind of never pretending to be somebody. You are just them in the most possible way you. And other people are naturally attracted to that. They feel that sense of like, I want to know this person. I want to connect with this person. Not because they're an oversharer or they're trauma dumping on me, but they always seem to be relatable. And so I think that would be one way is like, think about when you're in a situation, how can you be relatable? And this is a weird one, but like, in the bathrooms with ladies. I can't tell you how many new friends I've made in the long ass lines of the bathroom at conferences or concerts or other events. Like look for those other little pockets of kind of random non-traditional connection opportunities and kind of just start practicing there. You know, to look for those relatable instances and you'll be surprised just all the different things you kind of randomly find to start to connect with people over. Was that helpful? Did that answer?
Yeah, I will definitely try to.
Okay. It takes practice. It takes practice.
Yeah, I was going to share two tips, and the first
And I
one,
think
Amy,
that is as well.
say
Sorry,
again,
say that
Abu
again.
Bakr?
I think it requires courage as well with practice.
I was also going to share the tip about when you're standing in line.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's a food line, you can just look to the person right next to you in line and just come up with some trivial question to ask, such as, "Is this your first time here, or have you
Yeah.
have you tried the food yet, and how is it?" Just
Mm-hmm.
to get the conversation started. The other tip I would have is to find any organizer or staff at the event and just like stand near them or go up to them and start a conversation because they are a focal point. So they'll
Yeah.
often have people come ask them stuff. And sometimes the really good organizers who are connectors somebody will come up to them and they'll introduce them to you because you're there.
Mm-hmm.
So like just
Yeah.
be in the place where a lot of people are going to find information.
Yeah. People love to help. That's a great tip.
Other comments or questions?
Hey Dennis, this is Pierre. Just want to say, Amy, I really liked. I'm sorry I came in a little late, but even just the little
Okay.
bit I got at the end was sensational. So just want to say
good.
that very, very much.
Thanks, Pierre.
I particularly like the part you mentioned about in your red flags, the idea about how likes are not really being as emphasized. There's a big thing in analytics about this is because people have been taught so long to
Mm-hmm.
measure that. So I love that you called that out very much. I really did.
Thanks, Pierre. I appreciate it.
And Pierre, I will post the link to the recording. So if you're on that from that meetup page that you RSVP'd from, I'll post it there so you can watch the whole thing if you wish.
Good deal.
All right, and with that, Amy, thank you so much for joining us. I will see
Thank you,
you
Dennis.
at in
Yes.
person in San Diego at Content Marketing World.
Absolutely.
And for everyone else, thanks for joining and enjoy the rest of your summer.
All right. Take care, everybody. Thanks again.
Take
Look
care.
forward to
Thank
connecting.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you.